Now, it is wonderful to see everyone and to have everyone here. The reason why we do these community gatherings is I think that so many of us are at home, either alone or with a limited number of people. And it's really important to have an opportunity to connect with others. And if you've been on these calls before, you will remember that toward the end, we do have a time where we get split up into rooms where we can have a one-on-one connection with other people. We'll also be starting in a couple minutes with a meditation to bring us to a sense of calm. And we'll be focusing today on the soul trait of trust, or bitachon, which is trust in God or trust in the divine. And for those of us who are unsure about the divinity, we'll kind of get to explore what that might mean. So with no further ado, we are going to begin with a meditation as we always do. If you're new here this week and you're new to meditation, this is very quick. And there is this myth that sometimes that when we meditate, we're supposed to just bliss out and everything's going to become wonderful. And that's not always the case. Sometimes our mind races. And this is a guided meditation, so all you need to do is just listen and do what I ask you to do. And worst comes to worst, it'll all be over in a couple of minutes. So what I'd like you to do is to just relax in your chair and close your eyes. And take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And as you're going at your own speed of inhaling through the nose and holding, and exhaling through the mouth and holding, if thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them pass. Like watching a car move past on the highway. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, think to yourself, Shema, and on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we're listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little box that says chat. If you click on that, you can open up a window, and I'd love for people just to type in how they're doing today and how they're doing this week. I was looking and saying, oh, someone wrote the same thing I did, and I realized that was my answer. So for me, it's ended. Today's been a pretty good day. Yesterday was a bit buried. Yeah, it's getting old. It's tense. Some people are doing well. I'm glad that we're all together and we have this chance to share. As I mentioned earlier in the pre-call, I'm just scrolling through a few of these. I also wanted as an opening, because I've forgotten at the end, I feel generosity is such an important part of Jewish practice. And we're told that we should give to tzedakah even if we're receiving tzedakah. And right now we're all, in a place where we may be financially threatened, or we feel our health is threatened. And I'd love to kind of hear some examples of maybe generosity in your life, or some way, either some generosity that someone showed to you, or a way that you show generosity to others. I know for me, I've been trying to give to Second Harvest. I'm trying to remain present for my kids, even when my head is kind of all over the place. How's generosity shown up in your life? So you can just unmute yourself and answer.
For me, I have a Talmud study group, and we always put in tzedakah every time we meet. That usually goes to a Jewish organization. But I made a suggestion with the help of the clergy that perhaps our tzedakah could go anonymously to a community member, anonymously, who was struggling, and that was really well received as a nice thing to do more personally.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Generosity has shown up for me in some very big and astonishing ways. I can't go out. I'm stuck here. Got to stay behind this door. So there's not much I can do to help other people except give money, and I have done that. So, and also been present if somebody called me and wanted an ear. But I have had people offer to shop for me, offer to run errands for me. Last week, I think I said it was 11. It's now 15 people who have offered. Some of them I won't ask them to do it because they have one woman, she has lupus. She shouldn't be running around anyway, and she's got 4 kids and 12 horses. So I'm not going to ask her to do anything. But I have other people that are taking care of me, and they check in with me. I'm going to Costco. Do you need anything? I'm going to Safeway. Do you need anything? It just warms my heart that people are willing to do that. And some of the people that have offered are strangers because they're people that are on next door. And they have set up a whole network, if you go on the website, of people in the neighborhoods that are willing to do things, not just for me, but for anybody. Just call me, I can, and people are making masks for each other. And the generosity I'm seeing, the goodness I'm seeing is definitely outweighing some of the, there's some crime, there's some cyber hacking and icky stuff, but the beauty of the generosity I'm seeing is way outweighing all of that.
Thank you, Carol.
Makes me hopeful.
Yes, Kina?
As a musician, I'm very financially worried, and a sister and her husband are giving me $500 a month. And it just brings me to tears because they did this without my saying I need money. They just knew. And so now I can help other people too with that money, but it brings tears to my eyes to talk about it. And another sister sent me a jigsaw puzzle that it's really fun.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I mean, money helps, but a thoughtful gift like a puzzle can have, a huge impact on someone, or a phone call. Anyone else? Okay. I'm going to begin sharing my slides now. Okay, can you see the slides? Can I get some thumbs up? I see some nods. Excellent. Very good. So we've talked about the generosity. Now, as many of you probably remember, Mussar is a personal practice, a practice of how we elevate ourselves. And because there's a lot of a backstory for both Mussar and Jewish learning, I put together some assumptions that can help us get started if our own level of knowledge isn't that high. And in each one of these meetings and in each chapter of the book, I focus and I start on one of these assumptions. So we kind of learn them as we go along. The one for today that I thought was really interesting to talk about was this idea that we're driven by the conflict between the evil inclination and the good inclination. Now, the evil inclination, that's one that trips up a lot of people because we have a story in our head associated with evil. It's murder, it's terrorism, it's awful stuff. And in the Mussar context and the Jewish context, it's really much more akin to the id, to our selfish impulses. In one of our earlier calls, someone made reference to one of my favorite Star Trek episodes. So this time I put in a slide that I had made previously. And it's in the Star Trek episode, there was a transporter accident. And Captain Kirk got split into two. And there was a good Kirk and there was an evil Kirk. And the good Kirk was very kind and warm. And the evil Kirk was getting in fights and assaulting women and drinking. It was just horrible. The issue was the good Kirk could not make any decisions. And in order to be a whole person, we need to have both of these parts of ourselves. And the important thing is that we learn to guide the evil inclination with the good inclination. That we might have an impulse to do something and understanding, okay, well, how is this going to impact other people? And is this something that I really want to do? A few weeks ago, I got really upset about something and I wrote a very calm and measured email. But then the response, something just like triggered me and I wrote a real nasty gram in response. And that was a case where initially my good inclination like kept me reined in, but then I just kind of lost my cool for the second one. So we all have this sort of conflict that goes on inside of us. There's one quote from the Talmud that I have here at the bottom, which says that the impulse to evil is first called wayfarer, then guest, and finally mastered. And I'd love to hear someone, please feel free to unmute yourself. What does that bring up for you? What do you think it's talking about, this impulse to evil or impulse to selfishness or hostility? Why does it go from wayfarer to guest to master?
Can I speak?
Yeah, hey Karen, absolutely.
Hi. Well, I think that once we give in to something, such as, some sort of evil impulse, it's doing it once and then it kind of builds a little trench for itself or moves into our house and then becomes our master because it becomes easier and easier to go that path. But I also believe that the Yetzer HaTov is the same thing, and it also creates a path for itself. And if we can try to go on that path, we can have the Yetzer HaTov as our master.
Wonderful. Yeah, beautiful. I love it. Other thoughts?
Hi, I feel like it's, I love that quote, but I feel it's what happens if you invite it in. And I think that the critical point is when you become aware of it. And then you have a choice. I was earlier when you were talking, I was thinking, sometimes, not often, I have these fleeting thoughts which really make me uncomfortable because, I don't like to think I'm that kind of a person. And so, I say, well, that's not me. It's, it's the evil inclination, but it's part of me. I understand, or it wouldn't be coming, the thought wouldn't be coming, but I also feel that if I don't own it, if I don't feed it, if I don't embrace it sometimes, you know, it will pass. And I think that's kind of what that quote's about, that, you know, like I said, don't welcome it in.
Yeah. And you bring up a great concept too about choice and choice points, which is a big part of Mussar practice. And a lot of it is just becoming aware that we have a choice and not just sort of sleepwalking and zombieing our way through life. And I find it interesting being at home. A lot of the time there's sort of nowhere for me to run from myself. And I become much more aware of some of the stuff that's going on inside.
Greg?
Yeah.
Okay. This is Leanie, and I think for me, this is where mindfulness practice really comes into play, because I know in the past, I would kind of be unconscious when I was going towards the evil side, not intentionally wanting to hurt people, but going kind of in that unconscious way of just going from my impulses and not stopping to think, just slowing things down and stopping a little bit and being mindful. So I'm a big advocate of mindfulness.
Mindfulness is wonderful. It's what Rabbi Pears calls creating a little space between the match and the fuse.
Right.
Just create a little bit of extra space. It can allow us to make a different choice, which can have less hurtful outcomes. Well,
Can I speak?
Of course.
Sometimes I think that the impulse to evil feels good. There's a pleasure sometimes in it. And so it's very easy to make it a guest because as it's wayfaring across, oh, it feels good. So the next time, oh, it felt good, I'm going to do it again. So there can be some pleasure in it that makes it takes, as the last speaker said, some mindfulness to dig out and figure that out.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, anyway.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for also saying for me, because that's so important that as much as possible, and people on the call have been doing that, to speak about our own experiences, because we're all on this journey together. We're not here to kind of live someone else's spiritual life or comment on whoever might be out there, but really to speak our own truth and our own experience so that we can have an opportunity for growth and transformation as we experience this together.
I think that there's a difference between the thoughts and the actions. And I find for myself that I will let the thoughts in. I don't know that I keep them there for very long, and I know that I won't act on them. But the thoughts just surface. They do. I know I have lots of evil thoughts right now about what's going on with government and the president. And I know that I'm not going to act on them, but the thoughts just surface. They just do. And I think about them and then I let them go.
That's a great way to describe it. And that's why it's called like an inclination. Like that's the thought arising. And then it's like, okay, what do I do with this? And if we don't take that moment and it's like just pour it straight into Facebook, you know, then that doesn't do anyone any good. Thank you.
I think what that lady said before about it feeling good is part of why it's evil. It's devious. It has, you know, power, and it knows us, and it wants to be part of us.
Yes.
There's a saying, I'm in recovery, and it says, saying in recovery is when you're in a meeting, your addiction is outside doing push-ups. You know, so it's strong. And the feeling good is just like a really bad thing. Yes.
Yeah, and I like that you pointed out that it's devious also because I'm blanking on the name, it'll come back to me, but I'm thinking of one rabbi who wrote a lot about the evil inclination, and one of the ways that it undermines us is by telling us we're doing a good job. it's like, oh wow, you're doing such a great job. You've got this one taken care of. And then we kind of get complacent and let our guard down. And then when some kind of setback, it kind of sets us up for failure, because at some point we're going to have a setback. And then it sort of becomes that difference between, you know, all right, I eat one cookie and I'm going to eat 10 cookies because why not? You know, I've already blown the diet. Or more serious things. Or anyway, let's move on a little bit. May I have a volunteer to read this first paragraph explaining what trust is?
Can do it.
Okay.
I go?
Yeah, please.
Trust is a powerful sense of optimism and confidence based not on reason or experience, but on emunah, faith. You know that God is good and He's the only one in charge, and therefore you have no fears or frets.
Thank you. So those of us on this call, we have I'm sure, a whole spectrum of feelings about the divinity. And this is a very traditionally based approach, this idea of trusting in the divine, giving you confidence and optimism. Not everybody may feel comfortable with that. So I'm curious, like, how this lands with people on the call.
I have the deep faith in Hashem, but still at the same time, that's easier said than done.
Easier said than done. Thank you, Judah.
I have a lot of fear, but as soon as I step back from that fear and this trust thing and believe that there is a higher power, then I calm down a bit. But it's a constant. I'm so fearful of what's going on right now that I am so out of control. So, you know, I agree with this quote. It's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And it is part of the human condition that for most of us, even if we're on board with this, it can be hard to do. And especially when the times are as challenging as they are now, this is, as I was in a session with Rabbi Amichai Levi earlier, and he used this phrase, you know, when the rubber hits the road, you know, when the chips are down, you know, how do we respond to this? Other thoughts?
So I have an issue with, you know, I have a belief in God, but I have an issue with He's the only one in charge. I don't find that to be true. I think we have to take responsibility. If you go back to responsibility a bit, that we have a role in what happens. We might not be able to control it all, and other things that are happening in the world that God might have put in action also have a place. But I don't believe in the God that's there and in charge all the time.
Thank you, David. Yeah, so this can be true to some degree, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that God is the only one in charge. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, I also my name is Jack. Yeah, I also had a problem with it because it just seems simplistic to me, because it's a little more complex than that. I mean, how about the person who has had COVID virus, for instance, or a person who's gotten very sick or died, you know, and is close to death? You know, how do you tell a person like that God is always in charge? There is that, you know, going back to the very first thing about tying a camel to a post. I mean, it's it just, like I said, it's just something. It doesn't say the whole story, because it's just it's too complex than that.
Yeah, that's a great point. If we go too far down this road, then how do we account for challenging situations that come up? How and what if someone is sick? Does that mean that you know how might that help? Would that invalidate this, or where might that come into play? Does anyone have any thoughts? That was a pretty incoherent question, so you may not, but feel free to ask for clarification.
Can you clarify that a little bit?
Yeah. So Jack kind of put out a challenge. It's like, well, it's all fine to say having a sense of optimism and confidence based on faith, but what about the person who has COVID and is in the ICU? Where, does this idea of trust have a place for that person?
Uriela here.
Yeah, Uriela.
I was very taken this morning when I was for a few minutes on Facebook, and it was Cuomo talking, the one who got COVID virus.
Mm-hmm.
And he was I don't know, probably people saw it, but how awful it was that he would wake up in sweat and hardly able to breathe. And he called a pulmonologist, and the pulmonologist says, "Can you do this movement? Can you get up?" And he said, "Yeah, but I feel terrible." He said, "Get up." In other words, what he was telling him, he said, "You have to fight this. If you just lay, you give the COVID possibility to just go all over your lungs." But he was telling him to take deep breaths, even though it hurts. And I thought that I'm also in a recovery program, and I think they always say, you do your 1% and God does the 99%. But you cannot just, yeah. And I also think that fear.
Uriela, you've gone quiet. You may have just hit mute. Can other people hear her?
The tricky subject. We've learned to love without trusting even.
Thank you. We have and let's sort of not let go of that objection, because that's sort of part of what we are trying to figure out here, is how all of this plays together and what tools we might build. Could someone read the second bullet, please?
I'll read it. Many Mussar masters argue that faith in God is required for Mussar practice in general and as a precursor to trust. I disagree, which is why faith is not one of the soul traits I teach.
Right, so this is a counterpoint. Now it's presented by me, so I'm a little bit biased on this, but my personal opinion is that you don't, like, if faith is, it's a complicated issue for a lot of people. And my perspective is, though, even if we're not sure about the divinity, or we have deep doubts, or even feel like an atheist, we can still gain some of the same benefits from a trust practice, even if we're not, without getting hung up on, how much God is in the foundation. So this, in some ways, is almost the very different place on the spectrum from the Chabad perspective, which says God's absolutely in charge. And my perspective is, you can leave faith out of this conversation completely and still get a lot out of it.
So I think God shows us good and bad. And if there's no bad, then how do we measure what's good? But that's little comfort to people who have lost, for example, loved ones in this pandemic, who really did nothing wrong, who had no particular evil that was being punished or anything like that. It's a tough one. It really is.
Yeah, and I think that there are certainly strains within Judaism and very much in the Torah that if you like do all the good things that you will in some way be protected. And in the later parts of the Bible, like in the book of Job, that's very much discarded and disproven. And I think our empirical experience tells us that we live in a world where, you know, people who get cancer, who get the virus, it's not based upon their personal moral conduct. And even Zvi Friedman, he's not guaranteeing safety. He's just saying you won't have fears or frets. And so that's an idea that I think we should come back to in a couple of minutes. Here's the spectrum, which someone made reference to earlier. Which has two things: our spectrum of trust, where on one side, if we have too little trust, that can lead to being very fearful, but too much trust can lead to recklessness. What might that look like, to have too much trust or too much trust in the divine?
Oh, from the news today, how the ultra-Orthodox are meeting in minions and parties and weddings. They are not following the social distancing guidelines. They're not paying attention to the laws because I guess of their trust. So it's really not good.
Yeah, they're putting their lives at risk. They're putting other people's lives at risk. You know, if they go to the hospital, that's one more sick person that every doctor and nurse and other employees is exposed to. So absolutely, that's an example.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on that one because I hate to use, when we say the ultra-Orthodox, it's not really a true statement. They're ultra-Orthodox people and groups that are doing that. There are other ultra-Orthodox who are following all the guidelines. I think there's fundamentalists on all sides. So I just want to say we should be careful on trying to say a whole group is doing one thing or another. Because, you know, I have relatives and I know that they're staying at home and you know, keeping to it, and their community is doing the same thing, and they're from an ultra-Orthodox.
Thank you, David. Well said and well taken. Very, very good reminder that we don't want to. There are certainly examples of people who are doing this, but we should not be labeling them as a.
That's how scammers work. That's how scammers work. They get you to trust. They say something that's really beguiling, like, we can cure you you won't get the virus, you know, or we'll make you beautiful, whatever it is. And people just click and oops.
Yeah.
Happens all the time. There was a thing on the news about how people are hawking fake coronavirus cure and cures and preventatives, and it's not good.
Yeah, thank you. So, so part of our responsibility is discernment, is looking around and deciding, you know, what action should I take? Should I just trust and follow this course, or should I just believe what's being said to me? But if we disbelieve too much or we get too fearful, then it can prevent us from taking action. Let's talk about this second quote here. May I have a volunteer to read it, please?
Yeah, I'll read it. I like that. Rabbi Eliezer the Elder said, "He who has a loaf of bread in his basket but says, 'What will I eat tomorrow?' is lacking faith."
Okay, so how does that apply to where you are today? And I'm asking this to the full group, but maybe someone we haven't heard from yet. Or how does it not apply to where you are today?
Well,
I already talked, but it applies to me because I ran out and bought a lot of food. And I have cases of beans and I have a lot of rice. So I do not trust that I will have some. I'm not a massive hoarder like some people, but I also give to the food bank. So, you know, it's kind of like, okay, I'm trying to not hoard this away sort of thing. But I mean, I don't trust I'll have enough to eat if shit hits the fan. So that's
Yeah.
just having little trust, you know.
Thank you. You know, I had not even occurred to me how literally this can apply, given that the choices that we need to make about, well, how much is the food that I need to have around? And okay, I really should have a little bit more of you know, for me to feel comfortable to have a little bit more of a buffer than I might otherwise, without going totally into, you know, hoarding 24 cases of black beans, you know, in my garage or whatever. How else? What else?
Can I say something?
Yes, Leslie.
So I see this as we need to examine our abilities, because if we have a loaf of bread in our basket, we somehow had the wherewithal, the agency, the talent, the financial means to allow that bread to be created in our basket. So all those skills and resources and talents and bartering and finagling and cooking skills, we're still going to have tomorrow. And I find it really hopeful and like lifting up our self-esteem.
Beautiful. Thank you, Leslie.
But if you have all that and you're still saying, what will I eat tomorrow? It's not working for you as evidence that tomorrow will be okay. And you're not trusting in all that to believe that you will be okay. So that's where I think he's saying, if you still ask, what will I eat tomorrow? You're lacking the faith to think that all of this will still work for you in the future.
Yes, so Bonnie, okay, go ahead, Janice.
Hi, this is Catherine.
Yeah, sorry for that. Hopefully I didn't cut off anyone. I do believe that since we are living in a heavily loaded society where consumerism is and the wealth, and that's how we feel the security, all of that. So we pretty much lost many of our skills, how to, not just to prepare a meal or a bread or anything. We lost our ability to connect with our neighbors outside. And I'm referring to African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes a village to survive as well.
Yeah, so a very interesting connection that, okay, we have certain skills, but maybe other skills that we historically have had, we don't have now. And we do live in eras where many of us don't know our neighbors all that well. And at times like these, more and more, we may require our neighbors to pick up something for us, or to give us a roll of toilet paper, or, you know, potentially more serious things. And I think the longer this goes on, the more we're going to need to have those connections. Other thoughts? I found it very interesting that Bonnie brought in the word worry, because having bread in your basket but saying, what will I eat tomorrow? To me, I think part of what she was saying was that's an example of worry. And so what is Rabbi Eliezer telling us about worry in this teaching?
I think it's related also to the manna in the desert,
Mm,
you know, and there's stories about the people who didn't trust in God would go out and collect more, and lo and behold,
yeah.
that manna would turn rotten before they could eat it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was the original lesson about trusting in God from the manna episode in the Torah.
Absolutely. Yes. So this idea of having food and trust, it's, you know, you don't get more connected to survival than having food to eat. And so it's not a trivial example, I think, that Rabbi Eliezer picked. And it's something which, you know, right after we were liberated from slavery, we started, you know, the manna, that started very soon. It was a very early lesson. And that was one of those early cases that, hey, don't worry, the food's going to be there. You don't need to worry about tomorrow. And if you keep the manna, it's actually going to spoil, and it's not going to be good.
Somebody earlier mentioned mindfulness, and I do mindfulness meditation, and it says, "What will I eat tomorrow?" Well, you're not being in the present moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I don't know what that has to do with faith. But it's just a comment about being present and being mindful, and which helps not to worry.
Yeah.
I think if you have faith or hope or optimism, then maybe you believe that tomorrow won't be so very different from today. And that goes to your point about being in the present and not worrying so much about what tomorrow will bring.
Mm-hmm.
Or just believing that it won't be this dramatic change from one day to the next.
Yes.
I was just thinking of a different question, of a continuing question. Was it worry that filled your basket today? How is it that worry will fill your basket tomorrow?
It was worry. The worry piece had to do with when you had a full basket, wondering what you would eat tomorrow.
Exactly, but that's why I said, what if you asked that same person, was it worry that filled your basket today? Then why would worrying now fill your basket tomorrow?
Well said. Okay, well, now is the time when we're going to split up. I'll split you up into pairs, and you'll have an opportunity to go into a room with one other person. And as a thought, again, this came from the Soul Spa from Rabbi Amichai Levy's Lab Shul in New York. They read from Psalm 23, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. For you are with me. So with your partner, each of you will have a couple of minutes to kind of check in on where you are today in this confidential setting. And I'm curious, do you feel like the divine is with you, and what difference it might make, or it does make, to kind of feel like the divine is with you during this time? So I need to stop the share, and I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. Okay, so you should see something appear on your screen, which is offering you a chance to join. So click join. Nancy, I see you're still here. Okay, I've been asked for help in a room, but I'm not going to go. Okay, I'm just checking for those of you who are live. I am going to, oh, did Nancy has joined? So everybody has joined the room. Fantastic. So for those of you who are watching the recording or live, I'm going to check my watch. I'll give them 5 or 10 minutes. And now we'll do what I call the secret teaching. So it's another aspect of trust. This one I really like. I came across this reading the other day. It is from Rabbi Israel Salanter. He was the head of the Mussar movement in 19th century Lithuania. He was an incredible leader. He inspired a lot of people, and he really thought that Mussar should be something that should be practiced in community, like we're doing today. During his, at one point, whoops, what just happened there? Okay, we're back. There was a cholera epidemic, and he was speaking on the cholera epidemic, and this is what he had to say. And so the first thing he said is, we must not fear the cholera epidemic. For what value of the life, what is the value of life when we consider the overwhelming potential for spiritual failure? Now, one of the reasons that we don't always read a lot of Israel Salanter is he was really hardcore. I mean, he thought that like spiritual failure was the worst thing in the world. He also had a great respect for human life, but he's making the point here that if you're fearing, it's equivalent to some kind of spiritual failure. It is not having trust in the divine, but it's also, as we were just saying, it's a loss of mindfulness. It's a loss of being present. And if we allow our fear, which is controlled by the Yetzer Hara, by the evil inclination, if we allow our fear to take over, we are failing spiritually. We have an opportunity to stay present and to not let our fear dominate us. Now, he goes on to say that we shouldn't resign ourselves to dying or to do nothing to protect ourselves. And this again goes back to part of the conversation that we were having earlier, where were some religious fundamentalists in the ultra-Orthodox, but also in some Christian sects. I think it's come up in various Muslim parts of the world, where people are just saying, no, God is going to take care of me. I'm still going to gather in a group. And we've seen some tragic consequences of that. And Rabbi Salanter was very pragmatic. Mussar is very action-oriented. And that we need to, as he was saying, follow the regimen by learned physicians. I mean, this is a guy who was in the early 19th century in Lithuania saying, follow what the rabbis have to say. There was also a very famous story during this cholera epidemic that when Yom Kippur came around, Rabbi Salanter ate challah and drank wine in front of the congregation because he said, there's an epidemic. We need to stay strong physically. Life is more important than the commandments to fast on Yom Kippur, so we should eat. Now, the rabbinic authorities were incensed. They were not into Mussar. They thought this was terrible, and he ended up getting driven out of the community. So sometimes we are called upon to take a stand, and we have to step up, and that, we need to trust that God is going to be okay with us preserving life, that the divine is going to be okay with us. I mean, I think if someone is a person of faith, they should have enough faith that they're going to be okay by not gathering for a minyan. And he even goes as far to say that following the teaching of these physicians, it's like proceed according to the light of their words, for it is our duty to establish life in this world for the benefit of ourselves and for the benefit of others. And a lot of this really has to do, a lot of Mussar is about bearing the burden of the other. It's about taking care of other people. And if you're getting together in a group for prayer or getting together for a group in church, that is, you're just not thinking about the safety of other people. You're thinking about your own needs to pray or your need to follow these commandments. And Maimonides was very clear. He said that these things were not, these mitzvot are not done for the sake of God. It's not like God needs us to form a minyan. It's not like we're going to be punished if we don't. And I understand that it's important to behave in that way, but we, if you follow those beliefs, but it's not more important than life. I'm going to stop the share and let me check my watch. Okay, I think I want to give people a little bit more room. So that means that I need to, in an ideal world, I would keep talking here. But I think I'm actually going to rest. If you're on live, you want to open up another web page, I will not be offended. Just listen up, because in about 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to bring everyone back together again, maybe in 1 or 2 minutes, so that we can close out and finish on time. If you're watching this recording on YouTube or Facebook, you can kind of scroll along the bottom and you can see like a little mini preview. So just look for the boxes to start appearing again. And then you will know that I have closed the rooms and it is time for us to come back together, which is right now. So now everyone has 60 seconds to leave their breakout rooms. If this is like past weeks, people will wait till the last sec before they come back in. Oh, here, Karen, Kina, hello, welcome back.
We had so much fun.
Good. Well, one thing I forgot to do, and did you see my message? I keep forgetting to tell people to exchange email addresses or phone numbers. If you wish to carry on the conversation, you can message each other. That is totally optional, but it's just.
Oh,
I'll write it on the chat.
On the chat.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
I'll write my.
I can write on the chat too.
Okay, good. Hello, Michelle and Janos. Welcome back. Up here comes everybody else. We are coming in. I was just talking with the first few who came back that I forgot to remind people to share their phone numbers or email addresses if it was someone they felt a connection with and wanted to continue the conversation. This is an opportunity for ongoing sort of community and connection. I know Karen and Kina are exchanging their email addresses in the chat. If any of you wish to do that as well with the person you were talking with, you can send a message just to them. If you don't feel comfortable broadcasting, there's no obligation to do this whatsoever. But I do want us to have that opportunity if you really felt like you met somebody new. Last time someone emailed me and said, oh, how do I get in touch with so-and-so? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't, they weren't on my email list, so I can't give you their information. So yeah, so if you'd like to do that. Okay, how was that? What was, would anyone care to share something that they shared in the group or their experience of talking about this issue?
That was one of the most amazing 2-minute conversations I've had in a long time.
Who's speaking?
To be able to say,
it's Frank Schwartz and Linda.
Oh, okay, Linda, we can't see you. You're in the shadow.
I know. I hope that's just figurative. It was just a real sense of relief to be able to share those things that generally a person doesn't talk about.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Linda, and I'm glad you had that opportunity.
Oh, so.
Had a strong connection with nature as being showing us God and showing us
Tina, your sound is coming in and out a little.
I know. Nature. We attribute nature to give us strength. God.
That's the only other choice.
No, everyone.
Nature.
That's everyone.
Put in Diane.
Nancy.
Nancy. Let's talk about Nancy.
Okay. Any other thoughts? I mean, I'm curious for the question, like, what difference does it make whether you feel like you're alone or not? Whether you feel like you're alone, but what's the benefit of feeling like maybe God is with you? Is there a benefit?
Yeah.
Well, the end of Adon Olam, Adon Oli V'lo Ira. God is with me, I will not fear. So that's comforting.
So you find it comforting to feel that God is with you.
And I was going to say earlier this thing about whether he's in control or not. I think a lesson that I've learned about the Brit Milah was that that's our covenant with Hashem, and we do the cutting of the skin because we become partners with God in the creation of the world. So where Hashem is in charge, we're the partner, and we have our part to do. So it is, yeah, there's a big boss, but we're not powerless. So that's my feeling.
We're not powerless. And it's also certainly true that we are not in control. Like there may or may not be a divine plan or a God that's in charge, but certainly there's a world that goes on largely outside of our control. One of the things I'm going to share just one screen very quickly in our last minute or two. And that is some suggestions for taking action. And in Mussar practice, we try to, when we focus on a soul trait for a week, we start in the morning with the mantra. Should be trust in God and tie your camel as one possible mantra. But we also pick an action of some kind. And some of these come from the end of the chapter on trust in my book. But some of the things we can do is to ask for help. If we are a warrior, we find ourselves getting caught in worry, we can use a mantra. This one about control is surrendering the need for a particular outcome. That's really important. If you believe that God is in charge, then this just comes natural to you. But for me, I know personally who really likes someone who likes to be in control and was a workaholic for a while. When I was able to start saying, okay, I'm just going to send this email and I'm not going to worry about the outcome. I'm going to trust that I can handle whatever happens. It's just lowered my stress level quite a bit. Taking action to help other people can kind of get us out of our own head and realize that there's a bigger universe than just ourselves. And the last one is remembering that this idea of maybe the divine can be there to hold your hand, or that whatever happens that you will be able to handle it. So let's all now close our eyes once again to close our session today. And taking a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And focus on the light that's filtering through your eyelids. Imagine this is the light of your divine spark, a companion that's always with you. Feel the love and the warmth and the acceptance. Now tilt your head back and smile. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes.